What's up, everybody? It is Kellen here from Start Your Systems, and welcome to our first race review of the 2020 Lucas Oil Pro Motocross Championship, where I'm just going to be basically talking about the race that happened while I play the BAC version of Loretta Lynn's 2020. Obviously, it's not the national track, it's the amateur track version, so some of the sections are going to be a little bit different, and it's not going to be the exact national track that we saw over the week. But just still wanted to play Loretta's while I talked about Loretta's, and probably will be playing a different game for the review next week. But if you're unfamiliar with this and what exactly is about to happen, basically it's like a little podcast that I kind of do after every, usually just after every AMA type race, like a Supercross or Motocross, but I also do some of the GP stuff as well. I plan on actually having kind of like a week at Kegum's GP review coming at either Tuesday or Wednesday this week, but obviously I think people are still kind of jived from the weekend that kicked off the Lucas Oil Pro Motocross Championship at Loretta Lynn's ranch, and we're going to talk about it. So spoiler alert, if you haven't already watched the race or anything along those lines, I'll be talking about it right now. But yeah, let's dive into it. First of all, I wanted to start off this video by talking about the track, because I think it was one of those talking points coming into the first round of the Nationals of like, oh man, they're going to a track that isn't really designed to be a pro motocross track. Like, it really is a track that for the amateur race, it's catered for the amateurs. Like, it's tamed pretty far down with the jumps aren't very big. The track itself is very tight and twisty, just to be completely honest with you. And a lot of people were saying like, man, the 450s are not even going to get out of like second gear, maybe even not even get out of third gear or whatever. But personally speaking, I thought the track was totally fine. I believe that they were probably aided a little bit by the fact that it rained, so it made the track a little bit, tackier and slower, and they couldn't really get as much out of the bikes anyway, so it wasn't like blazing fast as you would see them race the amateur track on an amateur day. When it's dry, you didn't kind of get that same exact experience out of it from the pro guys. Now, they did change the track a little bit, but it didn't really lengthen the track too much. It maybe added what probably would have been a total of 5 more seconds to the lap by just extending kind of the switchbacks after the commandments here. But other than that, the track was, pretty much the same. So I would have been really curious with a dry track if those guys would have just absolutely destroyed the lap times that we saw guys like Levi Kitchen and Styles Robertson put down at the Loretta Lynn's amateur race. But we didn't get that opportunity. We might get it this coming weekend. But I just wanted to kind of commend the track crew there, Jeff Russell and the guys that put the work into making that track. I felt like raceable for a pro national. Like, it provided opportunities for passing and many different options in and out of the corners that I thought worked well. It didn't seem like it was overtly too small. Like I said, the rain and the mud kind of slowed things down, so you didn't really get a true sense of that. But I just thought it was a pretty good racetrack for the opener, and they need to be commended for actually putting something together that worked. Like I said, I'll be really curious to see it in the dry this coming weekend. And no, I don't know whether or not they're going to make track changes. I think they will, from some of the rumblings that I've heard. I don't know for sure. In my opinion, I think that they should run the track backwards or figure out a way to run the track backwards just so that it's completely different. But yeah, I don't know. I think if anything, they'll probably cut some jumps down or reshape some things or whatever. But either way, it was just really good to see pro motocross get started, whether it was at Loretta's or whatever, Chicken Licks Raceway. I think it's just good to see pro riders out on the track and kicking things off. So yeah, Loretta's interesting track to start the Nationals, but I think it worked out just fine, and in the end it worked out fabulous for Zach Osborne, who picked up his first career 450 overall victory, went 2-1 on the day, and I would say that he probably was the best on both motos, kind of like just took too long to get to the front in the first moto. But by the time he got into second in the first moto, like, he definitely clawed the gap down to Anderson. And Anderson rode great. Like, I was astonished to see Jason Anderson ride the way that he did in that first moto. That was completely unexpected. I would have probably even put money down on Anderson not winning a moto this year, and that's not to say he couldn't and didn't have the talent and all that stuff like that, but I don't know, I kind of didn't feel like he was going to be, mindset-wise in a motivated position to go for this short national series and go to some of these tracks that maybe weren't going to be as friendly to him because they're, really hot and technical tracks and stuff like that. But he completely shut me up in that first moto. That was an incredible ride from Anderson to start behind all the Suzukis of Norin and Sabachi and Anstey and all those guys and just blow by him on the first lap and take off. I think that although Osborne got to second and was running faster, that Anderson probably could have responded and done a better pace down the stretch there if he needed to, and was really just managing the gap, but still nonetheless, like, he rode fantastic and blew my mind a little bit. But Osborne for sure was on another level, I felt like, most of the day. Qualifying, he wasn't exactly at the top. That was obviously Sexton, and in the first session it was Webb that was fastest. But I thought Osborne kind of proved that he's going to be a gamer for this championship as quickly as the first qualifying session. Like, he looked comfortable, steady, ready to go. And he actually talked about in the post-race press conference how they brought the bike from Indiana last year, so like way back, whatever it was, like almost 12 months ago at this point, racing at Indiana, the final round of nationals, and he just changed 2 clickers on the forks on this bike and was dialed essentially for the track. So talk about confidence, where he felt like he had a setup last year that he was driving with down the stretch and just made a couple minor adjustments and was off to the races here at Loretta's. And I think it's kind of a cool story, too, to have Osborne win his first pro national at Loretta's for a guy that, like, he went through his amateur career pretty well unscathed. Like, he won a lot of titles. He was a front runner consistently. He was dubbed the next big thing for KTM way back in 2006 when he made his pro debut. And obviously, if you know his story, it just kind of didn't work out in the States, and he had to go to Europe, and he spent 5 years trying to chase a world title there, and eventually clawed his way back into the States by, putting a terrific ride in Supercross back in 2012 as a wild card effort. But to come all this way and have the ups and downs in his career that he's had, to win the first ever pro national at Loretta's and now be leading the 450 championship standings, and I mean, that I just think it's a incredible story, really cool, and I'm kind of just psyched for Osborne that he was able to get it done, honestly. Like, it's good to see that it's not just going to be cut and dry a walk-home title for Tomac this year, and there's guys that are going to come to play a little bit, and Osborne I thought was terrific. But actually, the question I wanted to ask to you guys today, because I want to add a new little section to this video every time I do these, is little commenter question of the day. I want to know who you guys were most impressed by, 450 or 250 class. I know I'm talking about 450 class right now, but to kick off the season, mixed conditions, a track that those guys haven't raced at in a long time and have never raced at as a pro, obviously. Is there anybody in either class that really stood out to you as like, man, I didn't expect that, if you will? And I'll probably get to some people that you guys will head down to the comments and answer with right now, but that would be my comment question of the day. Who were you most surprised or impressed with at the opening round here? But moving on, I wanted to jump over Anderson, who finished second on the day, and talk about Tomac, because the first moto was not very good. Just being straight up with it, and Eli admitted it was bad, essentially, to be running in that contending group for a podium. Battling with Osborne, battling with Musquin, Webb, all those guys that were up there, Sexton at one point, and to essentially just drop back, like even fell to the clutches of his teammate Cianciarulo there late in the first moto and ended up 7th. It was looking a little bit not great, and turned it around in the second moto, got a second, said he changed a couple things with his setting that he had messed up in the first moto, and it turned things around and it made him feel a little bit more comfortable on the bike. But actually, what was interesting for me is watching him fall back in that first moto and finish 7th. I was kind of just like almost in deja vu and to a point where like I was not even kind of concerned with him falling back. Like this was a weird round for Tomac. The mixed conditions and stuff like that seemed to hurt him a little bit, but I am not even the slightest bit concerned that Eli Tomac can still fairly easily win this championship, in my opinion. And the reason why I'm not concerned is because you look back to what happened at Anaheim, won this year, and he finished 6th, and he battled arm pump, and he didn't have the setup right, and he just wasn't dialed. And this is almost turning into Eli's MO, where he takes a little bit to get the ball rolling in a championship series. Sometimes he comes out firing, and that's great, but sometimes that has hurt him as well to come out and be blazing fast at the opener, and eventually leads to more mistakes because he puts himself in a position where he's got all the pressure immediately. Now, he just can ride almost pressure-free, I guess, to try to chip away at the points lead and not have to think about, I got the red plates on my bike and there's a target on my back and whatever. Like, he's the chaser again. And I think Osborne winning is a little bit of like Osborne's gonna be here to play. But I think Tomac is still in a position where he can quite easily start winning, moto after moto before long, and by the midpoint of the season, be firmly in control of the championship again. So I'm not concerned about Eli's rides whatsoever. Maybe you guys are. Maybe that 7th unnerved you a little bit to see some of the old Eli coming back in. For me, I'm not there, personally speaking, but it was definitely a unique situation to see him dropping back like that, because we really haven't seen it since Anaheim won back in January, which is forever ago at this point. He was pretty consistent in Supercross and didn't have many roller coaster rides that he's had in the past. So that old Eli still exists a little bit. Obviously, he said the setup was not correct, and he got that corrected and rode like we know Eli can ride in the second moto. But still, it was a bit of a weird moto, that first moto for Eli. If there are anything that I am like concerned about, I'm not as concerned about Osborne winning and having an 11-point gap on Tomac, as I kind of am concerned that Musquin is only 2 down of Tomac, and I'm probably reading into that too much. And Marvin coming back from an injury, I'm not expecting him to be like blazing fast, but Marvin going 4-4 or 4-5, I think it was on the day, and getting some decent points. He's mixed right up in pretty much everybody that's not Zach Osborne for this championship hunt already. And Marvin's that type of guy that, he just got like kind of a confidence boost that he came back after all this time off, all this injury and stuff like that, and immediately was a contender at the front, like so much so that in the first moto he started walking his way towards the front, and I thought the same was going to happen in the second moto as well. Obviously, it kind of ended with him going a little bit backwards, but I think Marvin's kind of been slept on a little bit, like all this time off with the knee injury, and people saying he's contemplating retirement because of the Moreau situation and his contract's coming up here pretty quick, stuff like that. But we can't forget how good of a rider Marvin is and how often he was winning races and contending for championships before this knee injury came about. So I think now that he's got this first one under his belt, he can get the ball rolling, he can come out swinging at the next round, start contending for a top 3, or maybe even go for a win at Loretta Lynn's too. I think that Marvin only being 2 points down at Tomac is kind of the bigger storyline that nobody's talking about here, because if he does come back and is that Marvin Musquin that we have seen in the past, and he starts clicking off consistent, second, thirds, a win here and there, etc., you almost have to look at him as like a guy that can unnerve Eli a little bit, in the sense where Zacho's never been in this situation in a 450 championship, but Marv has. Marv has taken championships down to the wire and has beaten Tomac straight up in motos and stuff like that. So I think sleeping on Marv is the wrong move here. I think he's still right in the thick of this, obviously, and started off his championship, I think, just as it needed to, coming off of that injury, in my opinion. I'm a little bit disappointed in Cooper Webb. I thought Cooper Webb was going to be a lot better, and he was way off in Moto 2, and he was just another guy in Moto 1. Like, it didn't seem like he really had a much of a fight in that freight train that was going on from 2nd through 7th or 8th or whatever it was. Just didn't seem like the Cooper Webb that we kind of saw in Supercross, and I don't know if you can attribute that to he's just not as comfortable outdoors on that KTM, or maybe he just, like Marvin, needed to get the cobwebs dusted off. I have no idea, but I was kind of disappointed. I thought he was going to be a guy that right from the get-go could contend for a podium or a win and stuff like that, but just really wasn't there. And then I was impressed with Sexton's second moto, obviously finishing third, but I was kind of bummed, I guess, because fastest qualifier, I thought he would have gotten better starts, both motos as well, and to fall while battling inside of the top 5. I think he was even third when he fell in the first moto. Like, you look at that as like man, that was a lost opportunity for some huge confidence booster right there, because let's say in that first moto he ended up getting passed by Osborne, maybe he ends up getting passed down the stretch by Barcia, who was ripping late in the moto, and he still ends up 4th or maybe even 5th in that moto. Then he's looking at a 5-3 or a 4-3 on the day. He's right in the thick of the championship hunt and stuff like that. And I think that was like a big blow for Sexton to finish 13th in that first moto, and like kind of bummed me out a little bit that it just didn't pan out to be a good day for him in the end, because I mean, he was great in the second moto, obviously has the speed and the fitness to battle with those guys throughout. Fastest qualifier shows that he has raw speed to contend with, and to already be in a deficit like he's at kind of bums me out a little bit. But on the flip side of that, I was actually really happy to see Justin Barcia be old Barcia a little bit. Now, am I going to read too much into this result, going 3-7 in tricky, deep-rutted conditions, which Barcia's always excelled at? No, but he was awful in Salt Lake City, even in the mud at Salt Lake City. And I know it's Supercross and different and stuff like that, but he was awful in Salt Lake City. And to see him charge forward and get third in that first moto was like, okay, he still exists. Barcia's still there, like the same one that we've known all these years. He's still there. So yeah, like I'm pretty up on Zacho. I'm very up on Marvin. I'm totally content with Tomac, and I'm like down on Webb, down a little bit on Baggett, even though he charged forward in the second moto. Definitely down on Cian Cerullo, who blew an opportunity to do some serious damage in the second moto with the hole shot, and a little bit down on Sexton, even though he was impressive for his 450 debut. I still was expecting maybe a little bit more after that fastest qualifying time. But I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on what you thought was good or bad from the 450 motos. Don't want to take too much more time dwelling on this because we haven't even talked about the 250s yet. But yeah, let's move on to the said 250 class, which was an absolute clinic. I mean, it doesn't get much more better day than what Dylan Ferrandis had. And I think the most impressive thing about Ferrandis' ride, both rides or his entire day, was that he's never been to Loretta's. Everybody that he was battling with in that class, McElrath, Hampshire, Jeremy Martin, Mitchell Harrison, Alex Martin, all those guys had spent many years going to Loretta's and contending for titles and stuff at the ranch, and they know how that track changes when it gets muddy, because those guys have all raced in the mud at Loretta's as well. So Ferrandis, who had never been to the ranch, had never raced the Amateur National Championship, being from France, just put a beat down on those guys. And I get it. Pro National, it's a different situation. They prep the track probably a little bit different than the amateur race. And in general, the track wasn't typical Loretta's because, they shape jumps differently, and it was a mud bog for practice and stuff like that. But I was still kind of impressed to see how much of a beatdown he kind of put on those guys for someone who had never been there. That being said, I think it was a little bit outlandish that he suggested his day was so good he could think about going perfect on the season after his second moto. And I know that probably some of that's lost in translation, but he basically got around to saying, like, my day was so good that I think I could do this 8 more times. And it's like, well, I don't think you can. As good as you were, Jeremy Martin's going to have his days. Hampshire's going to have his days. Someone like Hunter Lawrence, who had a just awful, awful day at Loretta's, is going to figure stuff out later. So I don't think Ferrandis is going to be perfect this year, but I still think that my prediction that he was going to win a title in this 250 class this season is not changed whatsoever. I still think he's clearly the favorite, clearly the fastest guy on the track, and just absolutely destroyed and showed kind of what he's made of for this outdoor title. What I thought was funny, but I mean, it is fans, it is what it is that Ferrandis cleaned up in the 250 class. And every single commenter on social media is like, it's time to go to the 450s for this guy. Gosh, how long is he going to be in the class? And it's like, I mean, like, there's people in that class that have been in the 250 class much longer, like Jeremy Martin, like Alex Martin, and hey, like Zach Osborne, who did a similar path to Ferrandis, where it came from GPs and spent many years trying to chase the title in the 250 class. Ferrandis has only been here. This is his 4th year in the USA. And, he missed a lot of time with some injuries back in 2017 and 2018 as well. So it's not exactly like Ferrandis has been in the class forever. Now, I get it. He's 26 years old. He's a little bit old for the class. But the dude's out next year anyway. Like, he's already going to 450s. It sounds like he's already going to Monster Energy Yamaha alongside Aaron Plessinger next year, which is going to be the Star Racing Yamaha 450 team anyway. But regardless, I just couldn't believe, like, the dude cleans up in the 250 class, and that's the first thing is like, just get up and go to the 450 class already. Like, nobody wants you in the 250 class. It's so stupid how people react to stuff like that. Whereas I'd imagine if, let's just pick someone out of a hat, Justin Cooper went out and cleaned house and dominated and went 1-1 and blah, 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 blah. I don't think people would be saying that about Justin Cooper, even though he's been a pro for about the same amount of time that Ferrandis has been in the States. Pretty much like half a year less. So anyway, I digress. Moving on from that topic because I don't want to go down a whole wormhole. Can we talk about RJ Hampshire for a second, people? To get the ACL surgery done and miss out on Supercross, which he was trying to get the ACL surgery done so he would skip motocross and come back when Supercross was supposed to be going again in the fall, but obviously they moved it up and finished it off in early summer, late spring, or whatever it was. He's like 4 months off of ACL surgery, and you could have fooled me. Like, to come back from that kind of injury and already be in the shape that he's in and the race form that he's in, damn, impressive stuff. Like, that's huge in my opinion. And Hampshire has a whole nother year in the class at least if he wants it. So you have someone like Ferrandis moving out next year. Obviously Faulkner is going to be a contender next year when he comes back and he's healthy, and there's some star power missing from this 250 class, obviously. But dude, Hampshire, I was pretty impressed with finishing second overall in his first race back off of ACL surgery. So yeah, I don't have much more to say other than just like that was a pretty incredible ride, I thought. And then, equal kudos, if you will, to Jeremy Martin, who hasn't raced a pro motocross since Muddy Creek National 2 years ago when he jumped off the track and burst fractured his spine. And, they were saying like he may never race again, and obviously came back and raced Supercross this year, but dude looked great. And obviously, losing to Ferrandis the way that they did doesn't really look great to them, I'm sure, but they only lost 8 points in the grand scheme of things. Hampshire and Martin split 2-3, 3-2. Hampshire had the better second moto, so he finished second overall, but they're only 8 points down of Ferrandis, and it just takes one bad start / crash for Ferrandis to have a bad moto, and suddenly those guys are thrust into a title fight again, which they're already kind of in anyway. But I'm saying, like, if Ferrandis is going to beat down the field every week, then, it's not much of a title fight. But I think that Ferrandis is going to have his bad days, and if those guys are consistently finishing on the podium like it looked like they could, they're going to be in a really, really good spot, in my opinion. That being said, I think someone like Shane McElrath or Alex Martin or Hunter Lawrence, who had a terrible day, are going to wreak havoc on the podium positions, and it's not going to be a runaway every week for J. Martin Hampshire. I couldn't believe how bad of a day Hunter Lawrence had. I mean, stalling or crashing in the second corner in the first moto and having a whole lap of trying to get the bike picked up and refired and stuff like that. And then I think that moto, he didn't even finish. I think he pulled off the track. And then the second moto crashed or something, and then got, I think he was 14th or something like that, which is a tough blow for a guy who I honestly had expected to be more of a title contender than another guy. But I think he'll turn it around and has another crack at Loretta's next week, so that's going to be good for him. But definitely very disappointed in that performance. I think I expected more out of him for sure. And yeah, that's going to be my big disappointment of the weekend, I think, is Hunter Lawrence, to be honest with you. But we'll see if he can get it turned around. But I want to talk about a lot of the things that I'm really, really excited about or really high on from the weekend. First of all, Mitchell Harrison seems like he hasn't lost speed going to Europe. Obviously losing the Bud Racing contract and not being able to go to Europe to finish his MX2 contract with that team, bit of a bummer for him, but maybe in a sense like a blessing, because it seems like he's taken this pro circuit opportunity and really ran with it. Like, dude was really good in the first moto. Unfortunately, battling with Alex Martin, he stalled it and could not seem to get that KX250 refired and lost a lot of positions. I think he ended up finishing 18th or something in the first moto. But second moto, right up in it again, another good start. Obviously got beat by his teammate Whackers, aka Cameron McAdoo, but I was impressed with Mitchell Harrison, because personally speaking, I thought of him and Sinai both getting those rides. I was expecting Sinai to do better. And nothing against Harrison. I just thought Sinai had a little bit more of that, like, holy crap, this is my last opportunity kind of thing in him, because, he was grinding out Supercross as a privateer and suddenly gets thrust into this opportunity. But maybe Harrison is looking at this as his chance to land another ride back in the USA in 2021. And if he's going to put in rides like he was in that first moto, I don't see why a team wouldn't pick him up. Like, why, if you're TLD, or why, if you're even Pro Circuit Kawasaki, are you not maybe thinking about having a look at Harrison if he's going to ride like that all summer? A guy with Supercross experience, obviously had a star ride and that didn't work out, but he's grown up a little bit, got more years under his belt, had to kind of reinvent his career like Osborne and stuff like that. Yeah, I was pretty impressed with Harrison. I was really impressed and kind of annoyed that I just dropped the ball on this selection, but in fantasy I picked Dylan Schwartz, which I thought was a perfectly fine pick, and it did end up being totally okay, because he charged from a ridiculous way back in 39th in the first moto to finish 19th, and then I think finished 15th or something in the second moto. But I was beating my head over my desk all day long because I forgot that Mason Gonzalez hole shot 5 of the 6 motos that he raced at the ranch a week ago. And yeah, lo and behold, Mason Gonzalez got much better starts than his other rookie debutants like Styles Robertson and Dylan Schwartz. And yeah, finished 9th overall, went 8-12. Dude's pretty good. I mean, I get that he just raced this track and probably has a little bit more of like a home field advantage in that sense. But I thought that showed a lot about what that kid's work ethic is and stuff like that, that he, instead of just training for the 20-minute motos at Loretta's, like, he clearly seemed like he was ready to go for 30 minutes and giving Cycle Trader Rock River something to be happy about on the weekend and stuff like that. That was really cool to see him have a good ride. And mixing it up with Carson Mumford, who has a couple nationals experience under his belt, but is on a Geico Honda and is expected to be like the next coming of Chase Sexton or whatever that's come through Geico Honda in the recent years. Mason Gonzalez doesn't have a star Yamaha ride lined up. He is Cycle Trader Yamaha probably through and through. He's probably going to be there next year for Supercross and Motocross, and to be right in the thick of those guys early on was really cool to see. And I'm glad that he got that experience, even if he's not going to be as good when we go to Ironman in a couple weeks or later in the season when we get to some tracks that he's probably never ever been to before. Just to be able to run with some of those guys, like he was legitimately battling with like Alex Martin and Derek Drake and Cameron McAdoo and some of those guys. Like, he was having to fight some of these real high level factory riders for his first ever race, and I think that is a huge lesson in how much faster he's going to have to get going, how much more fitness he's going to need, things like that, and gives him an opportunity to kind of go back to the drawing board this week, try to learn from it, maybe improve. But even if he doesn't, he still has that experience in the back of his head on what he needs to do, and he can obviously work for it. Whereas, unfortunately, like Schwartz, got bad starts both motos, couldn't fight with those guys, so didn't really know what the pace was, and I think Robertson had a DNF in the first moto or something. He went 38-16. So again, no good starts to speak of for him. He's only going to do the first 3 nationals, it sounds like, anyway, until Moseman's back. But yeah, I think Mason Gonzalez, valuable lessons learned running up front and consistently getting good starts and battling with those guys. And yeah, color me impressed. I didn't kind of actually see that one coming. I thought for sure at least Robertson would beat him. But I had higher hopes for Schwartz as well, and Mason Gonzalez was the man to keep an eye on. Good rides as well out of like Derek Drake in the first moto. He looked really strong. Was pretty excited about that. Jet Lawrence came from outside of the top 10 both motos to finish. I think he got 6th overall in the end. So that was good for him. Cameron McAdoo had a rough-ish first moto, turned it around the second moto. So there's a lot of good to be done for some of those guys. Like, it's not a total wash for the first round, where some of those guys are probably like thinking after the first moto, like, man, that sucked. Like, I should have had better ride, or I should have done something different, or my bike setup was way off. So I think a lot of those guys had, either one moto or 2 motos that they could, hang their hat on, as that things went at least reasonably okay. And we're off to the races with this 250 class, man. I think it's pretty clearly going to be tough to knock off Ferrandis from his throne. And actually, now that I think about it, I did want to talk about Justin Cooper, who I was also kind of disappointed in. And honestly, I don't know what needs to turn around for him, but I feel like the confidence that was knocked back from a really, really rough stretch in Salt Lake City, plus I know he was coming off an injury, those two things combined together are really starting to become a bit of a detriment for Cooper, who, in my opinion, was at least 3rd, if not 2nd, on the power rankings coming into this for the 250 class. And I would have dropped him probably even outside of the top 10 at this point in my power rankings, because although he did salvage the first moto after he fell, and he did have an okay ride in the second moto, dude is not looking comfortable. I don't know what it is. He doesn't seem like, in the past, he would get a start, he would find a pace, he would go with the leaders. It was totally fine. Doesn't look like it's totally fine anymore. It looks like it's like a struggle for him to grasp that early pace, and guys are blowing by him, and he just looked off. And yeah, I was pretty down on Lawrence, but I was also pretty down on Cooper too. Like, kind of bummed that both of those guys, who I was more or less looking at as guys that could challenge Ferrandis in the title fight, just had nothing really going all day long, it seemed like. So yeah, hopefully Justin Cooper can figure stuff out, because otherwise, like, Jeremy Martin and maybe Hampshire are going to be the only guys that really have something for Ferrandis. But I still, just talking about like I was in the 450 class, not worried about Tomac. Definitely not worried about Ferrandis. I think Ferrandis is in an ideal position after one round to make this series his own and cruise this championship home in a shortened series, maybe even wrap it up early if he keeps riding the way he is. And almost crucially for him, looking back to last year, he scored more points than anybody in the second half of the season in pro motocross in the 250 class last year. He won 8 of the 14 motos or something like that, 8 of the 12 motos. Was electrifying down the stretch. And that was after he got up to speed, because he was so focused on trying to win the Supercross title and take it from Cianciarulo in 2019, which he did, but Cianciarulo kind of blew it, obviously, that he put a lot of time and effort into Supercross and maybe not as much effort into his outdoor prep and testing. And it showed. The first 3 rounds, it wasn't really good for Ferrandis. He was obviously not getting good starts, which has always been his MO, but he wasn't charging forward either. He was kind of settling into the 6-7 realm, and then eventually turned it around in the second half of the season. So to start this championship with a 1-1 dominating performance, I mean, he backs it up next week at Loretta's again, goes 1-1 again. I don't know, man. I have a tough time finding a reason why he's not going to win this championship. I know it's only 1 round in, and things can change in a heartbeat, but Ferrandis looks pretty darn good. I know I've mentioned it a couple times, and I don't know how many people know this, but Washougal, the second round of the Nationals, was canceled, and Loretta's 2 is going to take its place, so they're just basically staying there, and they're going to fix up the track and stuff like that for next week's Pro National. And I know some people are going to be annoyed at that, because if you're trying to race amateur day at Washougal to go watch the national, you're obviously not going to see a national there anymore. But from what I understand, it sounds like, you know, MX Sports was trying really hard to work out some deals with the people at Washougal, and you know, we're kind of almost like waiting on them to figure stuff out with local government and stuff like that. You know, there are restrictions in place put on by these governments about things that can and can't happen, and unfortunately pro events fall under the jurisdiction of no-nos in a lot of these states, which is why they couldn't go to some of these states and do it. It's not like they didn't want to. It's not like they're like, well, screw Unadilla, we're not going there. Like, they wanted to go to Unadilla, but when the New York, you know, governor and all that stuff is really tightening restrictions down, then pretty unlikely you're going to be able to have a national there. And so that's ended up what happening in Washougal. It sucks because Washougal would have been a good national as well. But in a sense, it does actually work out a little kind of good for a lot of the privateers that were just straight up not going to go to Washougal. Like, there was a lot of privateers that we'd heard from that were like, yeah, there's no chance I'm starting the nationals in Tennessee, driving my butt all the way across the country to Washougal, and then driving my butt all the way back across the country to go to round 3 at Ironman. So in this sense, we may still have a pretty full-fledged privateer effort out there for round 2 that we probably wouldn't have had, but still a bummer nonetheless that we don't get to go to Washougal. Instead, another round at Loretta's, and we'll see how it goes. Kind of curious to see if the track is dry and they kind of leave it the same, what lap times are like and stuff like that. But personally speaking, I hope they change up the track. I'd hate to see it be the exact same thing 2 weeks in a row. But yeah, that's my synopsis of the opening round of the Lucas Oil Pro Motocross Championship at Loretta Lynn's. Big shout out to everybody that always tunes in and watches these. I know a lot of people were kind of asking me, like, where's the videos been lately, and I've been just kind of swamped with work, getting nationals schedule and all that stuff, or nationals content and all that stuff out and pumped up on racexonline.com. And then obviously being a dad, I just have not a lot of time to get stuff done at night. But we're back. I'm gonna have this one. I'm gonna hopefully have a Kegums review coming pretty quick, and some track walks and some other things coming in, as well as more broadcasts this week. So thanks to everybody that always sticks around and watches these videos. Want to direct you, if I can, over to racerxonline.com to check out articles and stuff written by moi, yours truly, including my boss Jason Wygant and my co-worker, the Honorable Mitch Kendra. And head over to racerxonline.com/subscribe as well if you'd like to get a magazine subscription. It really helps me out, helps me keep a job, hopefully. But head over there, subscribe today. Really would appreciate that. And check out our merch at our Teespring store. If you look down in the little bar below the video right now, there's merchandise down there that you can click on and get. I think you might need to have ad block off actually to see that. But anyway, yeah, thanks again for stopping by. Hopefully you enjoyed this little synopsis of Loretta Lynn's 1. And we'll have Loretta Lynn's 2 coming hot and heavy after next Saturday's racing. Appreciate it as always, and I'll see you guys in the next one. So long for now.